I've been a fan of his game. I've been watching him also last year.
We are going to put, João Fonseca names, on the list of the best players in the world really soon.
What you're about to witness is something extremely rare in tennis, and in all of sports. This is an 18-year-old kid outside the top 100 with barely any experience on the big stage, overpowering a seasoned top 10 player, almost without breaking a sweat. There's been so much buzz about João Fonseca. The kid from Brazil is scary good, and from all indications, seems to be the future of tennis. But we've been here before. After seeing all the comments you all left on the videos and watching João Fonseca absolutely demolish the competition at the ATP Next Gen Finals, I knew I had just witnessed a generational talent. And I wanted to talk about Fonseca extensively, but I decided to hold off to see how he would perform on the game's biggest stage at the Grand Slams. Was he that guy, or was it all hype? Let me tell you, I have been blown away with what I've seen so far. The first time I really started to follow João Fonseca was at the 2023 US Open Boys Tournament, a competition he ended up winning. At 17 years old, the kid had already become the first Brazilian to finish the season as #1 in the junior rankings. He had already made his ATP debut earlier that year at the 2023 Rio Open after receiving a wild card, but it was a rough initiation, as is usually the case, and Fonseca only managed to win 3 games against Alex Molcan. That was the only ATP match he played that year. 2024 came, and it was time to get more of an inside scoop on Fonseca's game. After decent performances in a couple of challengers, Fonseca made a huge statement in his home tournament in Rio with an emphatic win against Arthur Fils. It wasn't even about bageling a very good player in Fils in the first set, it was more about the effortless power and ball striking from the teenager we saw at the time. You could tell he was the real deal. The forehand was huge. The topspin and weight of shot overall was impressive to say the least. The backhand was solid, and you could tell that his movement and athleticism were going to get better with time since he still had a long way to go in terms of physical development. At that point, the only significant thing that could be considered a hole in his game was his serve, which we're going to talk about later because the serve has now also become a weapon. After beating Fils, Fonseca won his next match before falling to Mariano Navone in the quarterfinal in what was a fiercely contested 3-setter. Now here's one important thing to mention. During that time, Fonseca was playing a lot of doubles, probably to improve his skills at the net. Do not skip doubles, guys. It is a crucial part of any tennis player's development, and I actually made a video that tells you why. Check it out after this one if you haven't seen it already. Still, in the early months of 2024, many fans had already started to see Fonseca as Brazil's best talent since Guga Kurtin. But for the kid, it was time to make a huge decision. Fonseca decided to forgo his college eligibility and turn pro. He needed to show the world what he was made of. We saw Fonseca again at the Chile Open, where he lost to Thiago Agustin Tirante, but you could already tell that his breakthrough was around the corner. Fonseca continued to play more challengers and was also only competing at the clay court tournaments on the ATP Tour in Estoril and Madrid. Seeing the Brazilians' results on clay and the general trend of South Americans loving clay more than any other surface, I thought Fonseca's best performances were going to be skewed to clay, and initially it seemed to be the case because Fonseca didn't make it past the qualies at Wimbledon or the US Open. He did win the Lexington Challenger in July to become the youngest Challenger champion for the 2024 season. However, he really unlocked new levels towards the end of last year with the ATP Next Gen Finals win. Fonseca won all 5 of his matches to become the lowest-ranked champion in the tournament's history and the first South American to lift the trophy. Oh, and Fonseca was also an exclusive company, not to mention the $500,000 paycheck for the kid. Fonseca started the 2024 season outside the top 700 and finished the year inside the top 150, a massive jump reminiscent of the likes of Alcaraz and Sinner. Also possessing the huge weapons Sinner and Alcaraz had as teenagers, the floodgates were open for the comparisons. Was Fonseca the missing part of the future Big Three? I thought about playing the devil's advocate for a moment because, in reality, Fonseca wasn't going to be the first or last exciting player we would see. Such players come around every 2 to 3 years, and not many of them go on to become Alcaraz or Sinner. Most times, it ends up being a story of what could have been. Also, winning the ATP Next Gen Finals doesn't automatically translate to enjoying sustained levels of excellence on the ATP Tour, as we've seen with Hamad Medjedovic and, to a lesser extent, Brendan Nakashima. It was way too early to make a call for Fonseca, and there was no need to get carried away by all the excitement. But sometimes you just have to throw logic out the window and go with your gut feeling. Call me crazy, but all things being equal, and by that I mean no career-threatening injuries, João Fonseca will be a world #1 and multiple-time Grand Slam winner. Hold on, I know that's an incredibly bold claim to make so early into someone's career, but just give me a few minutes to tell you exactly why I'm sold on João Fonseca. Riding the momentum from his next-gen finals win, Fonseca won the Challenger event in Canberra, beating everyone in straight sets before going through qualies, where he also beat everyone in straight sets, and then Andrei Rublev in the first round. Fonseca had a 14-match winning streak and had won 22 consecutive sets, which Lorenzo Sonego finally ended. Oh, and I should also mention that going through the Australian Open qualies wasn't the worst thing in the world for Fonseca. I'm among those who think those matches helped him with his confidence and momentum. But now, let's go into Fonseca's game to see why he's the future of our sport. But before that, I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be bringing you all a super cool on-court series that we'll be filming in Miami, Florida over the next few months. So, if you're around the public courts in South Florida, keep an eye out. I might be around, and I'm always looking for hitting partners. Anyways, to keep up with all the latest content we have going on, definitely subscribe to the channel right now if you're not already. So Fonseca has the perfect recipe for success. His ground strokes aren't mechanical like we see with some players from South America. Rather, the kid packs a lot of offensive punch on his stroke mechanics. Fonseca checks all the boxes for what a destructive forehand should look like. He has a crispy clean technique on his semi-western grip, just like Jannik Sinner. I particularly love the way he explodes out of his split step and the weight transfer from his legs when going for a forehand winner. But it's not just that, it's also about the upper body rotation. Rather than only using his arm to hit a forehand in what would be an isolated movement, Fonseca incorporates the entirety of his upper body into the shot. This gives him that all-important coil that adds to the explosiveness. Take a look at the full upper body rotation that goes into this Fonseca forehand. Another thing you'll notice about the Fonseca forehand is that he often doesn't straighten his arm during the shot. The elbow remains bent throughout the motion, which is interesting because some of the best forehands like Federer and Delpo were often hit with the elbow straightened out. Still, the bent elbow doesn't take away any zip from the shot. I should also mention that, like Sinner and some of the other top guys, Fonseca starts off by flipping the tip of the racket behind his elbow for a longer and fuller swing path. The efficiency of Fonseca's forehand biomechanics helps him to create this easy power on the shot. So for those of you wondering how an 18-year-old teenager can generate so much racket head speed and hit harder than many of the top guys, well, it all comes down to the efficiency of his stroke production. When Fonseca faced Rublev in the first round of the Australian Open, we had lots of questions. Who was going to dominate the forehand rallies? Who would give up ground on the baseline to get more balls in play? And was Rublev's experience going to checkmate Fonseca's firepower? Well, I personally didn't have any more questions after the first set. Fonseca was able to trade forehand blows with Rublev and constantly take time away from the Russian, which isn't something many players are able to do. Fonseca even hit the fastest forehand winner of the tournament at the time. But the crazy part in all of this is that there was something even more significant than the forehand battle. This brings us to the Fonseca backhand. Fonseca has a full take back on his two-handed backhand, and it kinda reminds you of Novak. Not only is Fonseca able to redirect pace extremely well, but he's also able to generate his own pace. The most exciting thing to me is that he's able to hit a wide variety of backhands, even going as far as dictating rallies off the shot alone. One of the rallies in the second game of the second set against Rublev perfectly exemplifies this point. Did you see how Fonseca's backhand alone single-handedly ragdolled Rublev? In that same game, Fonseca reproduced another moment, this time disrupting Rublev's rhythm and totally wrong-footing him with wicked inside-out backhands. And also down-the-line backhands. It goes without saying that Fonseca's ground strokes are perfectly oiled machine units capable of destroying opponents. João hit a staggering 51 winners to 32 unforced errors against Rublev, which is an insane number of winners for a match that only lasted 3 sets. One thing I was particularly eager to see in the Rublev match was Fonseca's return position. See, Fonseca has a very wide stance on the return like Djokovic, and even on the defense, he manages to maintain his balance. Going into the Rublev match, Fonseca had hit 98% of returns inside the baseline this year, a pointer to just how frequent Fonseca takes time away from opponents. When he needs to, Fonseca can also shorten his swing path on the return to rush opponents as well. Against Rublev and Sonego, Fonseca showed good baseline variability, moving in and out of the court. The slice backhand on the defense was superb, and Fonseca was able to hit quite a number of outright return winners during his Australian-owned campaign, as he turned defense into attack quite easily, also creating a lot of damage from neutral positions. In addition, the phenomenal ball striking is another component of Fonseca's game that doesn't nearly get the same attention. Watching Fonseca at the Lexington Challenger last year, the biggest hole in his game was the serve. But now, he's hitting it so well that it's now actually become a weapon with good placement and speeds up to 140 miles per hour. Fonseca hit double figures for aces against both Rublev and Sonego, and was also able to produce many more service winners and effective +1s. Taking a look at the serve rhythm, it's a bit unorthodox because Fonseca gets his body into the loading position quite late in the service motion.
Fonseca comes to serve.
But more importantly, the Brazilian has a rhythm that works for him. I should also mention that Fonseca has a really good kicker with lots of action on the ball, and sometimes he mixes it up on the first serve for more variety. Take a look at how Fonseca's second serve average speed stacks up compared to the ATP top 10 players at the AO. Looking at other parts of his game, the variety is right up there. The drop shot off the backhand is good. The forehand drop could use a little more disguise, but overall, I'd say it's still solid. The transition and net game is extremely impressive, and the level of perfection is amazing. I'd also say that Fonseca's shot selection and decision making is incredible for someone his age. Although he sometimes seems a little too eager to hit winners from anywhere, he knows when to pull the trigger and when to calibrate his shots for the most part. His variety is the ultimate example of what modern tennis looks like, and it's not surprising that we're seeing more and more complete games in these next-gen players. But I want to touch on something else. Fonseca's match against Rublev was a coming-of-age moment. We're talking about going toe-to-toe against a player that's maintained his position in the top 10, won 2 Masters 1000 titles, and reached a total of 10 Grand Slam quarterfinals. But if we're being honest, Rublev's game has been pretty much one-dimensional, and he usually isn't able to absorb pace like many other players. This, in fact, made Rublev the perfect candidate in the top 10 for Fonseca. Picture yourself in João's shoes, getting the grand entry on your Grand Slam debut.
From Brazil, João Fonseca.
Fonseca settled nicely into the game and didn't let the importance of the occasion get to him. And with Rublev hugging the baseline and not often willing to concede his position there, Fonseca was able to blast him off the court with relative ease and was able to raise his level in the important moments. The Brazilian played 2 exceptional tiebreaks, often taking the initiative over Rublev, which was insane because Rublev didn't even play badly. He was simply outclassed. Fonseca increased his average forehand speed from 134 km per hour in the first set to 145 km per hour in the tiebreak. And it was a similar case in the third set. Here's a case in point in the third set tiebreak. For someone playing the biggest match of his life, it's not normal to have such nerves of steel and be able to max out aggression in key moments. When asked how he managed to be clutch under pressure, here's what Fonseca said.
It's one thing of myself that in the important points I play better. I go for the shots.
The self-belief is there, and you can see it even from his interaction with the crowd. The composure, demeanor, and confidence make you think that the Brazilian has been around the tour for much longer. His performance against Rublev was one of the greatest Grand Slam debuts in tennis, and you only need to see the records for yourself. But despite all the buzz around the Rublev win, there was still an untested part of Fonseca's game. That part was his physicality deep into a slam match. This brings us to Fonseca's second round match against Lorenzo Sonego. The Italian was a different test for João, being more crafty, and coupled with the fact that Fonseca now had considerable mileage on his legs, it was never going to be easy for João. Although Fonseca did defeat the Italian in Bucharest in straight sets, I really didn't understand how anyone could see Fonseca as the overwhelming favorite in the matchup. While the Brazilian might have been breezing through matches, he hadn't been tested much by multiple top players or by a best-of-5 in a Grand Slam. And of course, we're not including those 5-set matches at the Next Gen Finals. Fonseca did end up narrowly losing in the 5-set thriller, but really, the match could have gone either way. But I will say, the loss did highlight some key talking points with regard to João's physicality. The kid isn't done with physical development, so there's still room for improvement in his lower body strength, footwork, movement, and overall speed on the defense. And since we're already doing the Alcaraz-Sinner comparisons, we might as well do the same for the physicality, movement, and endurance. 18-year-old Fonseca is not as physically developed as the 18-year-old version of Alcaraz, but that's okay because some players continue to grow into their early 20s. Looking at Jannik Sinner as a case in point there. Against Sonego, Fonseca looked down and out in the 3rd set, but he fought through and ended up taking the 4th set, pushing the match to a decider. One of the incredible things Sonego did, apart from his clinical serve +1, was being able to move Fonseca around the court a little more. And don't even get me started on mentioning the brilliant drop shots, which the Italian used to perfection. He had more than half a dozen of them, which Fonseca couldn't really do anything about. Sonego was also clinical at the net, winning 31 out of 42 points. By no means taking away anything from Sonego's win, Fonseca didn't have the same level in him as he did 2 days earlier when he faced Rublev. But now we know that the Brazilian has a negative record when matches go over 2.5 hours, and it goes without saying that Fonseca might be in for a rough initiation to the big tournaments. Still, there's no need to be worried because with more experience, Fonseca is going to build more resolve to handle such adversity. If Fonseca plays a full season and he manages to break into the top 30 or top 20, that would be one of the wildest leaps in recent history. But personally, I'm more bullish on his long-term potential than the short-term, which is why it didn't make sense to predict a quarterfinal run even after he beat Rublev. Nishioka predicted a top 30 finish for Fonseca at the end of the season, while Sinner predicted a top 25 finish. Predictions are flying everywhere. I don't know how many more years of physical development Fonseca's got or how soon things are going to click for him, but if he manages to stay healthy, it's a matter of when, not if, for the Brazilian. But as far as this season goes, I'll consider a top 50 finish with some silverware a huge success. No need to rush things. He also doesn't get a lot of recognition, but shout out to Fonseca's coach Guilherme Teixeira, who's been working with the Brazilian since he was 12. Managing a generational talent is definitely not the easiest thing in the world. This is just the beginning though. João Fonseca is meant to be here, and he's shown that he's ready to play tour-level tournaments week in and week out. The hype around him might seem excessive, but it's for good reason. He's one of the most complete teenagers we've seen. But now that the other players on tour are aware, Fonseca will have a target on his back, and we can expect him to face tougher days. What are your predictions for Fonseca this season and long term, and what part of his game is most appealing to you? Be sure to let me know in the comments.